Humanity had always been seen as the underdog in the galaxy. Their technology, though impressive, was nowhere near the level of the other advanced species. The galaxy was ruled by powerful beings, and among them, the Ixthuri stood out. Known as the strongest Death World species, the Ixthuri were feared by everyone. They were a race of massive, powerful creatures with unmatched strength, able to survive and thrive on the harshest planets in the galaxy. No one dared to challenge them. The Ixthuri were merciless conquerors, using their power to crush anything in their path. They were led by the greatest of their kind, Kor, a commander whose skill in battle was legendary. Kor's fleet had wiped out entire civilizations, and his name was spoken in whispers across the galaxy. He believed strength was the only way to survive and dominate. To him, humanity was nothing but a weak species that was barely able to keep up with the galaxy's standards, but then something strange happened. A small human colony on the edge of Ixthuri space sent out a distress signal. The colony was being attacked by a lesser-known alien species, and it seemed like nothing could stop the invasion. The Ixthuri, thinking it would be an easy mission, sent Kor and his fleet to deal with the problem, expected to wipe out the attackers quickly and return home. Their reputation still intact. However, when Kor arrived, he was met with something unexpected. The human colony, though outnumbered and outgunned, was holding its ground. Instead of crumbling, the humans fought back with determination and resourcefulness. Kor watched in disbelief as human soldiers used everything they had: primitive weapons, simple tools, and clever tactics to repel the invaders. The Ixthuri fleet expected to see a scene of surrender, but instead, they saw humans who refused to back down. Captain Eliza York, the leader of the human defense, stood firm at the front lines. She was a strong, calm presence among the chaos, barking orders to her troops while keeping an eye on the incoming threats. She didn't fight like the Ixthuri did. She used her mind. She analyzed the battle, making swift decisions that allowed her people to hold their position against the alien invaders. It was a battle of wits and willpower, and the humans were proving to be much more resilient than Kor had anticipated. "Impossible," Kor muttered under his breath, watching through his ship's viewport. "How are they doing this?" The Ixthuri commander was known for his ruthlessness, his ability to crush enemies with sheer power. But here in front of him, humanity was doing something he couldn't understand. They were fighting for their survival, not relying on strength, but on their determination to live. As the battle raged on, Kor's curiosity grew. He'd expected to see a quick, easy victory. Instead, he was watching a species fight like they had nothing to lose. The invaders, who had once seemed unstoppable, were slowly being pushed back by the humans' surprising resilience. "What's your name?" Kor asked his second-in-command, who had been tracking the humans' movements. "Captain Eliza York," the officer replied. "She's leading the defense. She's one of the best commanders humanity has." Kor's eyes narrowed as he observed York. There was something about her that intrigued him. She wasn't like the other human soldiers he had seen. She was different. It wasn't just her skill in battle, it was the way she inspired her people. She was calm, determined, and fiercely protective of her people. Kor saw a fire in her that reminded him of the Ixthuri warriors, the same unyielding will to fight and survive. The battle continued, and after hours of intense fighting, the humans managed to push the invaders back. They hadn't won the war, but they had bought enough time for reinforcements to arrive. Kor watched as the remaining invaders fled, leaving the human colony standing. It was a victory, though it had come at a great cost. "I need to speak with her," Kor said, more to himself than anyone else. He wasn't sure why. The battle was over, and he had no reason to engage with the humans. But something about what he had witnessed had shaken him. He had thought humanity was weak, but now he saw that there was something more to them, something he couldn't quite explain. His fleet moved into position. Soon after, a communication signal was sent to Captain York. She had been expecting it, though she didn't know what to expect. Kor's reputation was known across the galaxy, and humans were cautious around the Ixthuri. Still, she agreed to speak with him. Moments later, A hologram appeared in front of her, showing Kor's towering figure. He was every bit as intimidating as the stories had described, his massive form framed by the dark background of his ship's bridge. Captain York. Kor's voice was deep, like thunder rumbling in the distance. I must admit, I did not expect you to survive this battle. York stood tall, her face unreadable. We don't give up easily, she said, her voice steady. What do you want, Commander? Kor's eyes flickered for a moment. He was not used to this kind of response. The humans usually bowed down or begged for mercy. But this woman, this human, stood in front of him with the same defiance that he had seen in the battle. She was no different from the strongest warriors of his own people. I've seen something today, Kor said slowly, something I didn't expect from your kind. You're not weak. You're not like the others. What are you, humans? York met his gaze, her expression unwavering. We're survivors. We don't know how to quit. We'll fight to the last breath to protect what's ours. Kor was silent for a long moment. The answer was simple, but the way she said it made him wonder if the Ixthari had been wrong about humans all along. This first part introduces the tension and intrigue, showing the strength and resilience of humanity through. Kor stood on the bridge of his ship, staring out into the vastness of space. The battle was over, and the human colony had survived. His fleet had taken minimal casualties, but that wasn't what bothered him. What bothered him was the humans. He had expected them to crumble under pressure, to be weak and afraid like so many others. But instead, they fought with a fury he had never witnessed before. The Ixthari had always been the strongest species in the galaxy. Strength was their foundation, their pride. Kor had believed that no other species, no matter how advanced, could compare to their power. But now, after witnessing the humans' unexpected resilience, he found himself questioning everything he had ever believed. Commander, what should we do next? His second-in-command, Terran asked, breaking Kor's thoughts. The colony has been saved, and the invaders have fled. Should we remain here to assist? Kor took a deep breath and shook his head. No, Terran. The humans have shown they can handle themselves. We'll leave them for now. But what about the rest of the galaxy? Terran pressed. The humans may be strong, but they are still outnumbered.
Ow.
Other species might see them as weak targets. Kor paused, his eyes narrowing. He wasn't sure why, but Terran's words made him uneasy. He had never cared about other species before. The Ixthari had always been the dominant force, and that was all that mattered. But the humans, they were different. I want to learn more about them, Kor said, surprising even himself with the words. I want to understand how they fight, how they survive. Terran looked at him in confusion. Sir, you want to study them? You've never shown interest in the other species before. Why now? Kor didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to face Terran, his gaze intense. The way they fought wasn't just about strength. It was something else. Something. I don't understand. Weirin remained silent, sensing that Kor was deep in thought. The commander had always been focused on power and conquest, but now something had changed. There was a new question in Kor's mind, one he had never considered. Before, what made the humans so strong? Captain Eliza York sat in her command room, her mind replaying the battle. The human forces had been outmatched, but they had fought with everything they had. She had led them through it, making quick decisions and staying calm under pressure. But even she had to admit that it wasn't just her leadership that had kept them going. It was the humans themselves. They didn't give up. They didn't know how to. As she sat at her desk reviewing the battle's aftermath, a message came through. It was from Kor. Eliza couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She had seen the Ixthari's power up close, and she knew what they were capable of. Yet she also knew that Kor had been impressed by how her people had fought. The Ixthari had always been conquerors, but now it seemed like they were studying the humans. Why? She activated the message, and Kor's holographic form appeared. Before her, he looked as imposing as ever, his massive frame framed by the dim light of his ship. Captain York. Kor's voice was deep and commanding. I wanted to speak with you. You and your people have shown great strength. I have to admit, I did not expect that. Lisa raised an eyebrow. And what do you want with that information? Kor's eyes flickered, and for a moment there was a hint of something else in his expression. I want to understand you. The way you fight, the way you survive. It's not like anything I've ever seen before. I've always believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. But you, ... you fight in a different way. Eliza studied him closely. You want to learn from us? She asked, not entirely sure she believed what she was hearing. Kor's hologram nodded slowly. Yes, I want to know what makes you so ... resilient. So determined. You fight with your hearts, not just your strength. It's something I don't fully understand. Eliza remained silent for a moment. She had always known that humanity had something unique, something that set them apart from the other species in the galaxy. But hearing it from Kor, the most feared warrior in the galaxy, was unsettling. We don't give up, Kor, she finally said, her voice steady. It's as simple as that. We don't give up, no matter how hard things get. We fight for each other, for our families, for our survival. That's what makes us strong. Kor seemed to consider this for a moment before. Speaking again, I have always ruled with strength. I thought that was the key to survival, but now I see that maybe there's more to it. Maybe there's something I've been missing all these years. Lisa didn't know how to respond. She had always been a fighter, but she had never thought of herself as someone who could teach others, especially not someone like Kor. Perhaps we can help each other, she said slowly. You've taught us a lot about strength, Kor. Maybe it's time for us to teach you about something else. Kor looked at her with something akin to respect. Maybe you're right, Captain. Perhaps there is more to this galaxy than strength. Perhaps there's something even more powerful. Over the next few days, Kor continued to observe humanity. He watched how they interacted with each other, how they supported one another, how they worked together even in the most difficult situations. It was a strange thing for Kor to witness. The Exeri never worked together in such a way. They were individuals, each one competing for power and dominance. But the humans, ... they fought as one. They shared their strength, not just through battle, but through their unity, their spirit. It was a lesson that Kor was beginning to understand, though it was a difficult one for him to accept. The more he watched, the more he realized that the true strength of humanity wasn't in their bodies or weapons, it was in their hearts. The humans were willing to fight for each other, no matter the cost. And that, Kor realized, was something that the Exeri had never fully understood. Kor's mind was filled with questions. Could the Exeri learn from humanity? Could they change? Could they become more than just conquerors, more than just warriors? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that his people had been wrong all along. The galaxy was about to change, and Kor knew it. The question was, would he be ready for the transformation that was coming? Kor's ship was silent as it drifted through the cold void of space. He sat in the command chair, his thoughts consumed by the humans. What he had witnessed in the past few days had unsettled him. The Exari were known for their strength, their power, but the humans had shown him something that he didn't understand: the way they fought. Not just with their muscles, but with their hearts. He had never seen anything like it before. He couldn't stop thinking about Captain Eliza York. She had led her people with calm determination, using strategies that seemed foreign to him. Kor had always been a warrior who relied on sheer force. To him, the strongest survived. But the humans, they didn't just survive, they thrived. And that was what fascinated him. Commander Terran's voice broke through his thoughts. We've received a communication from Captain York. She's requesting a meeting with you. Kor's eyes narrowed, but he didn't hesitate. Prepare. The communication link. Moments later, Eliza appeared on the holographic screen. She looked the same as before, focused, calm, and ready for whatever came next. But Kor could sense something different in her. She had proven herself in battle, but now she was about to do something even more difficult. Commander Kor, Eliza said with a nod. I've been thinking. You've watched how we fight? I think it's time we take things to the next level. Kor raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Eliza smiled slightly, though it wasn't a smile of amusement. I think you should face me in combat. 1-on-1. Let's see if you truly understand what makes humanity strong. Kor was taken aback. A challenge from a human. He had fought many battles in his life, but never against someone like this. A human commander who had proven time and again that her people's strength was not in their physical size or weapons, but in their will to never give up. I will accept your challenge, Kor said after a long pause. His voice was calm. But inside, something stirred. He wasn't sure why, but something about this fight felt different. This wasn't just about strength. It was about something deeper. Eliza's eyes glinted with a fierce determination. Prepare yourself, Commander. It won't be easy. The day of the challenge arrived, and both Kor and Eliza stood in the center of an arena that had been set up on one of the neutral planets. The atmosphere was tense, the air heavy with anticipation. Kor towered over Eliza, his massive frame, a testament to the raw power of the Ixtheri. His muscles rippled beneath his armor, and his eyes burned with the desire to prove his superiority. Eliza, on the other hand, was smaller, but no less determined. She stood straight, her posture unwavering. She wore no armor, only a simple military suit, her hands poised and ready. She wasn't going to win through brute force, but she had no intention of losing either. This was her chance to prove to Kor and to herself that humanity had strength in ways the Ixtheri couldn't yet understand. The crowd of Ixtheri soldiers and human observers fell silent as Kor and Eliza faced each other. The battle was about to begin. Kor lunged forward with a roar, his massive fists swinging toward Eliza's head. The power behind his blows was enough to shatter mountains, but Eliza was ready. She ducked low, narrowly avoiding the strike, and, with a swift move, she swept her legs beneath Kor's, sending him stumbling forward. Kor growled in surprise, but quickly regained his balance. He turned to face her, his eyes filled with a newfound respect. This human was fast. She wasn't relying on strength. She was using agility and strategy to keep him on his toes. Eliza didn't hesitate. She charged at Kor, aiming a quick punch to his side. It landed, but it barely fazed him. Kor countered with a swift kick, knocking Eliza back several steps. She stumbled, but she didn't fall. She was hurt, but she didn't show it. "Is that all you have, human?" Kor taunted, his voice booming across the arena. Strength was unmatched. But he also knew that Eliza wouldn't give up easily. Eliza wiped a bit of blood from her lip and looked him in the eye. "You haven't seen anything yet." With that, she sprang forward again, this time aiming for his knees. Kor attempted to block, but Eliza's speed caught him off guard. She struck him hard in the joint, sending a shock of pain through his leg. For the first time, Kor felt something he wasn't used to: uncertainty. The Ixthari commander gritted his teeth and launched himself at Eliza, his fists a blur of motion. He was faster than she expected, but she didn't back down. Grabbed his arm and used his own momentum to throw him off balance. Kor hit the ground hard, his heavy frame shaking the arena. For a moment, everything was still. Kor lay there, breathing heavily, and Eliza stood over him, her chest rising and falling with each breath. She had done it. She had knocked him down. But it wasn't about victory. This wasn't just a fight. It was a test. Kor had learned something valuable today. It wasn't just strength that made a warrior strong. It was their ability to adapt, to survive, to keep fighting no matter what. Kor slowly got to his feet, looking Eliza in the eye. There was no anger in his gaze, only a quiet understanding. He had underestimated humanity before, but not anymore. They didn't just fight for themselves, they fought for each other. They fought with everything they had, and that was something he hadn't seen before. "You are strong," Kor said, his voice soft but filled with admiration. "Stronger than I thought." Eliza wiped the sweat from her brow and nodded. "Strength isn't just about size or power. It's about willpower." Kor, the will to never give up. Kor stood tall, a slight smile forming on his face. "Then it seems I have much to learn." The days after the battle between Kor and Eliza were quieter than expected. The Ixthari commander found himself thinking more and more about what had happened in the arena. I had expected the fight to be about strength, a display of who was the superior force. But instead, he had learned something he hadn't been ready for: The true strength of humanity wasn't just in their bodies. Kor had returned to his ship, his mind buzzing with questions. Could the Ixthari ever learn to fight like the humans? Could they adopt the spirit of survival that the humans possessed, even in the face of impossible odds? It was a difficult question, one that challenged everything Kor had believed about his species. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The humans had shown him a new way of thinking, and it bothered him. It troubled him in ways he couldn't explain. Meanwhile, Elisa returned to her own ship, feeling a mix of satisfaction and uncertainty. She had proven herself to Kor, but the challenge wasn't over. They still had much to learn from each other. The humans were still vastly outnumbered, and their strength was in their unity. But that alone wouldn't guarantee their survival. It's not when facing threats far greater than themselves. The war wasn't over, and the galaxy was full of dangers that neither the Ixthari nor humans had fully understood. A new threat had been growing in the Outer Rim, a deadly force that even the Ixthara were reluctant to face. They were called the Vethera, race of insectoid creatures that were known for their viciousness and ruthless nature. The Vethera had swept through countless worlds, leaving nothing but death in their wake. They were a species built for war, with weapons that could destroy entire planets. The humans, despite their resourcefulness, were no match for the Vethar alone. Elisa knew that if they didn't act soon, the Vethar would reach human colonies and destroy everything they had built. She needed help, but she wasn't sure if Kor or the Ixthari would come to their aid. The Ixthari didn't make alliances, they conquered. But there was something different about Kor. She had seen it in his eyes after their fight. Maybe, just maybe, the Ixthari could change. Elisa sent a message to Kor, asking for his help. If he turned them down, humanity would be left to face the Vethar on their own, and that would mean certain defeat. But if Kor agreed, the two species could combine their strength and stand a chance against the coming storm. The reply came quickly. Kor's message was simple. I'll help you, Captain York. But this time, we do things my way. Eliza stared at the message for a long time. She wasn't sure what my way meant, but she knew they didn't have the luxury of turning down any help. It was time to put aside differences and face the real threat together. Days later, Kor's fleet arrived in the system where the Vethar had been spotted. Eliza stood at the front of her ship, watching as the Ixthari vessels entered the sector, their massive forms filling the space like shadows. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The Ixthari were a formidable force, but the Vethar were just as deadly. This was going to be a fight like no other. Kor's flagship, the Vengeance, moved into position beside the human ships. The Ixthari commander contacted Eliza directly, his voice steady. We need to prepare for the worst. The Vethar are relentless. They won't stop until they've wiped us out. But we have something they don't. Elisa raised an eyebrow. What's that? Kor's holographic image appeared in front of her. We have the will to survive. That's what makes us strong. That's what will make us win. Elisa nodded, her eyes locked on the approaching Vethar fleet. The time for words was over. It was time to fight. The battle began as soon. As the Vethar ships appeared on the horizon, their insectoid forms were unlike anything Kor had ever seen. They had no visible weapons at first, but as they closed the distance, their ships unleashed deadly energy blasts that tore through the human and Ixthari fleets alike. Kor's fleet responded with overwhelming force, their ships moving with precise coordination. Eliza's forces fought alongside them, their tactics sharp and decisive. But despite their best efforts, the Vethar kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. Kor's voice crackled over the comms, his tone serious. This is not enough. We need to change our tactics. Eliza's heart pounded as she quickly processed the situation. What do you suggest? Kor paused for a moment before responding. We're going to need to sacrifice a few ships. The Vethar's main weapon is their numbers. We need to break them. Eliza frowned. But she knew Kor was right. It couldn't fight the Vethar head-on and win. The only way to stop them was to outsmart them. She quickly issued orders to her fleet, coordinating the sacrifice that Kor had suggested. The plan was risky. Eliza's ships would charge directly into the Vethar fleet, drawing their fire and creating a gap for Kor's ships to strike. It was a plan that would cost lives, but it was the only way. As the human ships moved into position, Eliza felt a surge of determination. This was the moment. This was the fight that would determine their future. The battle raged on, and as expected, the Vethores' focus shifted toward the human ships. They took the bait, firing their deadly weapons, and drawing the attention of the insectoid fleet. The human ships were battered, but they held their ground, buying precious time. With the gap created, Kor's X-Theory ships surged forward, their firepower ripping through the VTHR ranks. It was a brutal, intense fight, but the humans in X-Theory had learned to work together. The Vethsar, taken by surprise, struggled to adapt to the new strategy. As the final Vethar ship exploded in the distance, a heavy silence fell over the battlefield. The fight was over. The Vethar were defeated, but the cost had been high. Several human ships had been lost in the attack, their crews sacrificed. To create the opening for victory, Eliza stood at the command center of her ship, staring out at the remains of the battlefield. She had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a loss. She thought of the soldiers who had given their lives. She thought of the families who would never see their loved ones again. She thought of the future. Was this the price they had to pay for survival? Kor's voice came through the comms once more, breaking her thoughts. "We won, Captain, but the cost was heavy. This is the way of war." Eliza looked out into the vastness of space, a heavy weight on her heart. "Yes, Commander, the cost was high. But we've learned something. We're stronger together, and that's the lesson we'll carry forward." The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. The humans and Ixthari had fought side by side, but now they would have. To face even greater challenges, the galaxy was changing, and it would never be the same again. Ask ChatGPT. The battle was over, but the weight of it still hung heavily in the air. The Vethar had been defeated, but at a great cost. The human and Ixthari forces had fought together, their strength combined. But the number of lives lost was impossible to ignore. The Ixthari, once a species that dominated through sheer power, now found themselves facing a new question, one that Kor, their most respected commander, could not ignore. Was there more to strength than just power? Kor sat in his quarters, aboard the Vengeance, staring out at the stars. His mind was a whirlpool of thoughts. He'd always believed that strength was the key to survival. But now, after fighting alongside the humans, he knew that there was something deeper at play. Strength was important, yes, but it was not the only thing that mattered. What had made the humans so strong was their unity, their will to fight for each other. They didn't just rely on power, they relied on something much greater. The loss of so many human ships weighed heavily on Kor's mind. He had seen the sacrifice firsthand. The humans had been willing to risk everything to ensure victory. It wasn't just their military tactics that impressed him. It was their heart, their drive to protect what mattered most. The humans weren't just fighting for their own survival, they were fighting for each other, for their families, and for a future. As Kor sat in silence, Terran, his second-in-command, entered the room. Terran was a fierce warrior, one of the best, but even he had been affected by the losses they had faced. "Commander," Terran said, his voice carrying a weight that matched the mood in the room. "We've received messages from the human fleet. They want to discuss the next steps." He stood up and turned to face his second-in-command. "What do they want?" "Why?" he asked, his tone heavy with thought. Tarn hesitated before answering. "They want to continue working together, Commander. They've seen the strength we have when we fight side by side. But they also understand that we have much to learn. They want to know if we are willing to keep fighting with them." Kor's eyes narrowed. "They want to learn from us?" "Yes," Terran replied, and ... They also believe we can learn from them. They believe there is more to power than brute force." Kor thought for a long moment. The humans had asked for something that no one had ever asked from the Ixthari before. It wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about learning, growing, and changing. Kor had always been focused on strength, on the power to conquer. But now, the humans had shown him that there was more to life than just surviving. There was something deeper, something that tied them all together. I will meet with them, Kor said finally. We will discuss the future. Elisa stood at the head of the human fleet, watching as the Ixtari ships docked nearby. The silence in the room was deafening, filled with a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. They had won the battle, but there was still so much they didn't understand about the XTHARI. And now, the most powerful species in the galaxy was willing to listen. They had seen something in humanity, something that made them reconsider their place in the galaxy. But would it be enough? She looked around the room, her officers standing at attention, their faces a mixture of pride and worry. The battle had taken its toll, and even though they had won, the cost was clear. The humans had lost many ships, many lives. But there was something they had gained, an unexpected ally in the Ixtari, and perhaps even a chance for a future where humanity wasn't just a small player in the galactic theater. As Kor's hologram appeared in front of her, Elisa took a deep breath. His presence was imposing, even though they were no longer enemies. There was a new understanding between them, but the road ahead was still uncertain. Captain York, Kor's deep voice filled the room. I've been thinking. About what? You said after the battle, about how strength isn't just about power. You were right. Eliza stood tall, meeting his gaze. We both have something to offer, Commander. We have different strengths, but they don't have to be at odds with each other. Kor nodded slowly. The Ixtari have always believed in strength, but now, I see there is something more. The will to protect, the drive to survive together, these are things we have never understood, but perhaps we can learn. Heart skipped a beat. She had expected Kor to be stubborn, to hold on to the old ways. But here he was, admitting that humanity had something valuable to teach him. It was a moment she never thought she would see. We can learn together. Kor, Eliza said, her voice filled with conviction. The galaxy is changing. If we want to survive, we have to change with it. We have to adapt. And we have to do it together. Kor's expression softened, a rare sight for someone as fierce as he was. I agree, Captain. We have much to learn from you. And perhaps you can learn from us as well, Eliza smiled, though it was bittersweet. She had known that humanity was strong, but seeing the Ixtari acknowledge it was something different. The war, the sacrifice, had brought them to this point. And now, they had a chance to create something new. We will rebuild, Eliza said. Together. Kor nodded, his eyes steady. Together. The days that followed were filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and discussions about the future. The Ixtari and humans worked side by side, learning from each other. The Ixtari began to adopt new tactics, focusing not just on brute strength but on cooperation and planning. The humans, in turn, learned the value of power, of standing strong in the face of overwhelming odds. It wasn't easy. Ashura were not a people who had ever relied on anything but themselves, and the humans were still learning to trust their new allies. But as the days passed, something remarkable began to happen. The two species began to understand each other in ways that went beyond war and survival. The galaxy had changed. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity. And the Ixtari were no longer enemies. They had become something new, something that would shape the galaxy for generations to come. As Eliza stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the stars pass by, she couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. The battle for survival had brought them to this moment. And now, with the Ixtari at their side, humanity had a chance to build something greater. The road ahead was long, and there would be more challenges to face. But for the first time, Eliza believed they could face them together, and that, she realized, was the true strength of humanity. Not just survival, but the ability to change, to grow, and to find strength in each other. The galaxy was a place of constant change, and now the largest shift in history was underway. The humans, once considered a weak species, had proven themselves in ways the galaxy could never have predicted. Their strength wasn't in their size, or their technology, but in something much deeper, something that even the mighty Ixtari had come to respect. It was the strength of the human spirit, their ability to adapt, to fight for each other, and to survive against all odds. Kor stood, At the command center of the Vengeance, looking out over the stars, the view was the same as it had always been, yet somehow everything felt different. The Ixtari, once the galaxy's most feared warriors, had changed. They had learned from the humans, and in turn, humanity had learned from them. They had faced threats, and together they had emerged victorious. But now, a real test was beginning. The Vithar, once a great enemy to both species, had been driven back. However, the galaxy still held dangers that no one fully understood. The peace between the humans and Ixtari was fragile, but it was stronger than ever. The galaxy was changing, and the future seemed uncertain. Kor wasn't sure what the next step would be, but he knew one thing for certain. He could no longer view the galaxy the same way. The Ixtari were no longer just conquerors. They were part of something bigger, something more powerful than themselves. And the humans, The humans were no longer the underdogs. They had proven their place in the galaxy, and now they stood side by side with the Ixtari, not as allies but as equals. Eliza stood on the bridge of her ship, staring out at the stars. The same stars she had gazed at countless times, but now they seemed different. The galaxy was no longer a place of fear and uncertainty. It was a place of hope. The humans had fought for their place in the galaxy, and they had earned it. The road ahead was not an easy one. The peace with the Ixtari had come at a price. The war had cost many lives, and the scars of battle would take time to heal. But it wasn't just the physical scars that needed healing. The humans and Ixtari had to learn to trust each other, to work together, and to build a future where they weren't enemies, but allies. Elisa had seen the transformation in Kor. She had seen the mighty Ixtari commander struggle with his own beliefs, his own understanding of strength and power. But through their alliance, Kor had learned that there was more to life than conquest. And humanity had learned that sometimes power alone wasn't enough. Unity, cooperation, and mutual respect were just as important. As Eliza thought about the future, she was interrupted by a message. It was from Kor. Captain York. Kor's voice came through the comms. "It's time we begin our next step." Eliza raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Kor's holographic image appeared before her. "We need to create a new alliance. One that includes more than just the humans and the Ixtari. There are other species out there, species that have watched us, waited for us to show that we can work together. It's time to build something greater than ourselves." Eliza smiled. "You mean ... a coalition?" "Exactly," Kor said, his tone serious. "We've learned a lot from each other, Captain. But if we're going to truly change the galaxy, we need to unite with others. There are threats out there that neither of our species can face alone. Together, we can face them. And together, we can show the galaxy that there is a new way of doing things." Eliza looked at the stars once more. "I agree. It's time for something new, something better." The first meeting of the new coalition was held in a neutral system, far from the reach of any one species. Representatives from the Ixtari humanity and several other species, including the Sarath and the Kilk, gathered in a large space station. It was the beginning of something entirely new. Eliza stood beside Kor, her eyes scanning the room. The atmosphere was tense, filled with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. The Srath, a fierce reptilian species, had long held to their isolationist ways. The Kilk, a species of intelligent aquatic beings, had only recently emerged from the depths of their home planet, and their trust in others was hard to earn. Kor stood beside her, his usual intensity tempered by the weight of the situation. He had once seen the Ixtari as the dominant force in the galaxy. But now, he was part of something much larger, a coalition that included species who had never worked together before. "It's a strange feeling," Kor said quietly, his voice barely audible in the crowded room. "I never imagined a day when the Ixtari would work side by side with the Tesrath." Elisa nodded. "Stranger things have happened. Look where we are now." The leaders of each species took their seats and the meeting began. It was a slow process, but the atmosphere was different from any other diplomatic gathering Eliza had ever been a part of. There was no hostility, no suspicion. Each species had come to the table with a common purpose: to ensure the future of the galaxy, to protect it from the threats that had once seemed impossible to face alone. As the discussions went on, Eliza could see that the road ahead would be difficult. There were old wounds, old hatreds that couldn't be forgotten overnight. But there was something new in the air: a willingness to try, to find common ground, and to build something better. Weeks passed and the new coalition began to take shape. The first joint missions were small, but they were important. The Extheria and humans worked together to patrol sectors of space that had once been dangerous, keeping the peace and ensuring that the galaxy's most vulnerable species were protected. The Srath and Kilk joined in, contributing in their own ways, each species bringing something unique to the table. Eliza and Kor found themselves working together more closely than ever before. The trust they had built over the course of the war had transformed into something else: a partnership. They were no longer just commanders of their own species. They were leaders of a new, united front. One day, as Eliza stood at the helm of her ship, watching the stars stretch out before her, she received a transmission from Kor. Captain Kor's voice came through. "The coalition is stronger than I imagined. The galaxy is changing, and we are part of that change." Eliza smiled. "Yes, Commander, we are." For the first time, she felt a sense of peace. The road ahead would not be easy, but it was theirs. To walk together. The galaxy had changed. And with it, the future had opened up in ways no one could have predicted.